Hi guys, Jackie with Famished Farm, and we're back this week, but we're not going to cook 3 new entrees because it's summer and it's hot out. It's going to be 90 plus degrees for at least about 2 weeks around here. And so I want to take advantage of grilling outside, maybe burgers, some chicken, some pork chops. All that can go out on the grill, but what can we make to go along with it? We need some summer side dishes. So let's get started. This grilled cabbage side dish does not get any easier. All you need is a cabbage and some spices. The recipe calls for a large head of cabbage, and I am just going to use a half a head. And you're going to want to leave the core in the cabbage. That's going to keep the wedges all nicely in shape. If you cut the core out, you're just going to have the flakes of cabbage instead of a nice wedge. Next, you're going to want to prepare your foil packet, and for this particular recipe, I'm going to use my grill basket with the foil inside. It just makes turning whatever you're grilling a lot easier. Then I'm just going to make sure that they will all fit inside this packet okay, and once I've determined that, then I'm going to start the seasoning process. Now, I did use some other recipes as inspiration, so that's where I came up with using the bacon grease that I've got in the refrigerator as the part of the seasoning for the cabbage. And once I'm done kind of smearing it on all sides, then I'm just going to use some salt and pepper and just a little bit of garlic. And you're going to want to repeat that then on the other side. Because we're kind of not huge fans of garlic, I don't use garlic on the second side, but I do salt and pepper. And then just fold your foil up. I put a second piece of foil on the top and add my cage. This is the perfect summertime side dish. It's easy, it goes on the grill so the heat stays outside of the house. It uses garden fresh produce that you probably grew yourself or you can find easily in the store. It's budget friendly and it's healthy. So this is just a quadruple win in my book, and we'll be making this on repeat throughout the summer. So that first recipe was delicious and easy. It uses simple ingredients, just cabbage and then whatever spices you have in the house. So that was from allrecipes.com, and this will go on a weekly rotation or a couple week rotation for us during the summertime. It was that good. Now, it did take a little bit longer grilling than, say, the burgers, maybe about the same as the chicken would be, but we did cook it till it was very tender. If you prefer a crisp tender, then maybe cook it to the beginning of the 30 to 40 minute range instead of our 40 minutes. And the other thing was, be sure to leave that core in. The core is important to maintaining the wedge shape. I can't state that enough. If you want loose cabbage, fine, cut the core out. But if you want a wedge shape serving, leave the core in. I used some other grilled cabbage recipes as inspiration for my version of this recipe. That's where I got the idea to use the bacon grease. Another recipe had wrapped it in bacon. I didn't have bacon to use, but I did have bacon grease. So I made use of a pantry staple in this case. One win for me. Our second dish today, our summer side, is an Asian cucumber salad, and that you'll find at feastingathome.com. Now, her recipe calls for Turkish, Persian, or English cucumbers. Well, guess what? I've got pickling cucumbers, and that's what I'm using. I'm gonna basically use my mandolin to slice these thinly. That one I just cut up there in the corner is gonna be my little samples while I'm cooking. And these cucumbers are delicious, guys. If you want to be extra fancy, use a fork and score these cucumbers lengthwise. The recipe author says that will help the dressing cling to the cucumber. It sounds like a great idea. I just didn't take the time to do that today. I'm just going to skip straight ahead to the mandolin and get these cucumbers sliced up thin. If you don't have a mandolin, but you have really good knife skills, which I do not possess, go ahead and just use your knife to cut these thinly. Either way will work. Our next step is going to be salting these cucumber slices and then letting them sit for a little while to release the liquid. And I will just tell you, if you're on a salt restricted diet, this is a step that honestly I am not going to do next time because I just thought the slices were too salty. Now you could avoid that by rinsing the slices when you're done, soaking them, but then honestly you're going to get them wet anyway and have to dry them again. So I would just personally skip this step altogether. In the notes to the recipe, the author, and actually in some of the comments, there's great ideas for substituting ingredients or spices for this recipe. My first substitution is simply going to be, I don't have scallions, so I'm going to use red onion. And I chop these finely. The recipe says to slice. You do you. The recipe calls for fresh ginger and fresh garlic. I only have a couple cloves, very small cloves of garlic, so I'm just going to use dried ginger. Then to give this dressing the Asian flair, you're going to use some rice vinegar, soy sauce, and sesame seed oil. It does call for toasted, I just have regular. It does call for a whole tablespoon of sesame oil, and to keep it healthier, I use half of that, but certainly you could use 1 teaspoon, and I've made a note to just use 1 teaspoon the next time I make this. Now we're going to add a little sweet. I'm going to use maple syrup, but you use sugar, honey, whatever you prefer. Just like on the soy sauce, you could have used liquid aminos or coconut aminos. The recipe calls for chili paste, but I'm going to just use about a teaspoon of sriracha. Then we're going to toast some sesame seeds to put on top. You can use 1 to 2 tablespoons. Use whatever you feel is right. And I'm just going to toast these in the microwave. And I put it on for 2 minutes to start. And then I toast for a total of 5 minutes, doing 1 minute to 30-second intervals. Mix this up well, give it a taste to make sure it's sweetened, and this was just perfect to me. We're going to move over to the sink now, and these cucumbers have been sitting for a while, so we're going to get them in a colander and let this liquid drain off. And I'm going to give this an assist by using some paper towels to kind of blot them as we're going. And onto assembly. So add your cucumbers, stir in your dressing, and then add your sesame seeds, and voila, you have a summertime side dish. So if you have lots of cucumbers coming in, like I do, and you're looking for a great addition to your summertime rotation, this is it, an Asian cucumber salad. Now, I don't like it quite as much as my go-to cucumber, onion, tomato with a little vinegar and sugar and some water, but it's very good, and it is a nice change of pace. This was another great choice because it ticked off a lot of the boxes as far as didn't heat up the kitchen, used things that I had in the pantry, and cucumbers. Who doesn't have a lot of cucumbers when they first start coming in the summer? This is super good, and if you want a little change up of your normal cucumber salad, this might be your choice. And what's our third recipe? Let's get to that too. Our final summer side dish is a zucchini dish, and if you're like me, I planted 2 zucchini. I wish I'd only planted 1 because I'm already overrun. But this is a good way to use 1 large zucchini. Now it calls for one that is about a pound. The one I had happened to be about 1.25 pounds, but it was just fine. Any extra zucchini I blend or use my food processor and just pulse it, and then put it in a freezer bag and add it to whatever I've got that needs an extra punch of vegetables. We're going to start here today by finely chopping This is probably about a 1/4 cup of red onion. The recipe calls for 1/2 of a small yellow onion. Use your taste accordingly. Then we'll move over to the stovetop. I have my wok set up. We're going to add some olive oil to that, and we're going to end up sauteing these onions for about 5 minutes. I can already hear you guys shouting, what are we doing in the kitchen with the stove going, sauteing onions when this is supposed to be a summer side dish? Well, I hear you guys, but it's zucchini and it's delicious, so hang with me. For seasonings, you're going to start with some dried oregano, and guys, don't do the bowl, just add it right to the can of tomatoes. A little bit of garlic. I'm using dry garlic, not the cloves. That was my can of tomatoes. Here I'm going to add it into the can of tomatoes. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cayenne pepper instead of the crushed red pepper, and some salt and pepper. Back over at the stove top, we're going to give the onions a stir, add in that can of tomatoes, making sure to get all that goodness out of the can, and then we're going to just let this simmer for about 25 minutes. I know, guys, I know it takes a long time, and it's over a hot stove, and it's summertime. You want to be out in your pool, enjoying your yard, out gardening, but this recipe is super good, and it is worth the 25 minutes. Trust me. And the star of the show, this is a 1 1/4 pound zucchini. I'm just going to cut the ends off. I've already washed it. And I'm going to use my mandolin to do these slices, roughly about 1/8 of an inch thick. If you have great knife skills, do that. I'm also pulling out a baking sheet, and I'm going to layer it with some paper towels. And now do as I'm telling you, not as I did here. In between each layer of paper towels, as you fill them with zucchini slices, salt and pepper, both sides, before you add another layer. I didn't do this, so I had to, go back and redo it. This whole process took me about 6 minutes. If you do it the way that I'm telling you, you can, I'm sure, cut the time in half. These slices were not perfectly, 1/8 inch thick. There were some gaps in them, especially where it hit the seeds, and it's okay. You're aiming for about that 15 slices, but you're going to have many more than that. And the bigger ones, just layer on top of the ones with holes in them, and everything will be okay. I promise you, it will be fine. Okay, here's where this recipe went a little wrong, and I wasted some time. You want to season these zucchini strips as you go, and you're gonna, once you get a paper towel full, season one side, flip them over, season the other side, add a paper towel for your next row, and keep going like that until you're done. That'll save you a couple minutes right there. And I have washed the basil and the parsley, so now I'm just going to destem it. And this was another reason I picked this recipe. My basil and parsley, all my herbs are coming in gangbusters right now, so this is a great time to use a big old handful of each of these. And I am thankful to even have any basil and parsley, thanks to my dog, who constantly rearranges my pots in search of toads and lizards. Ah, Tilly dog. We'll start our filling now, and I've substituted cottage cheese for the ricotta. I always have cottage cheese. I hardly ever have ricotta, so that's the reason for the substitution. And then we will go ahead and finely chop up our both the basil and the parsley. I've just added both of these together. And earlier in the day, I had the lemons left over from another recipe that were partially zested, and I zested the rest of that lemon to get a teaspoon of lemon zest to go into this mix also. Then add 1 egg, and we are gonna stir that up just slightly in the side of the dish here. And we're adding some cheese. Now this is some pre-grated Parmesan I had. And we want to go for a couple of tablespoons here And then we're going to add in a half a cup of, actually we're going to go ahead and grate a full cup of mozzarella, but we're just going to add 1/2 cup to the filling. The recipe calls for more salt at this point, which I decide not to do, but I do a couple of good shakes of pepper and give it a good mix. Now we finally get to start assembling. We're going to put 1.5 cups of our sauce on the bottom of the dish and spread that out. Now I'm going to grab my cutting board back and use the end that doesn't have the cheese on it to assemble these roll-ups. And start out with the fat end towards you and then just make it solid. So I'm going to flip this over so I've got a landing spot basically for this filling. We're going to use about a slightly heaping tablespoon of filling in each of these roll-ups, and then just roll them up and place them into your tomato sauce. And the recipe says to shoot for 3 rows of 5, but because my baking sheet is rounded, I'm not going to get quite 15 roll-ups into this pan. This process is a very forgiving one. The filling is quite thick, so it holds together nicely. So as you can see, I just make do with rolling up these imperfect slices of zucchini, and they all look pretty darn good once they get in the pan. I have a little bit of extra filling, and I'm just going to kind of squeeze that along the sides of the pan into the first couple of roll-ups I did that maybe didn't have as much filling. Then I'm going to grab my wok that has the tomato sauce in it, and you want to layer, if you want to keep this kind of pretty, layer the tomato sauce in between the zucchini, between the green strips, so the green strips are still showing. And it makes a pretty presentation, but if you're impatient, like I usually am, and this is why, because it's not going to be perfect, so why bother? Just get that sauce on there, and then next up we'll put in our cheeses. So this is the other 1/2 cup of mozzarella, and then we'll add the tablespoon of Parmesan to the top also. And you'll notice I did have some extra sauce, and I just end up putting that in a storage container and throwing it in the freezer. And then this is going into that oven, 425 for 20 minutes. And it comes out and it is beautiful. It smells so good. And yes, the kitchen is hot. And guess what I did? I took the leftovers, I added some brown ground turkey and the leftover sauce, and it became a vegetarian lasagna for later in the week. The main thing for me is the baking time. It made a delicious side dish, but it takes a while to prepare and it heats up your kitchen. So you guys decide on that one. But if you guys have some great suggestions for your favorite summertime sides, please leave them in the comments below. I'm so happy that you joined us today in the kitchen. We had a great time cooking, and we'll be back again next week to do some more. So come back and see us again, okay? Bye. Thanks.